Welcome back, everybody. Episode 14 of My Awakening podcast. The title of this one's going to be called The Road Not Taken. Now, with the understanding of what we call free will, we tend to see things as an open doorway to pretty much all possibilities. However, sometimes it can also be a doorway to a limited understanding. We are the choosers of our lives, contrary to popular belief, and the choices we make tend to hold a certain responsibility within them. We're going to delve into this concept in just a few moments, but first, please do me a favor. Like, comment, favorite, follow, share this podcast with your clients, family, or friends as we journey through this new togetherness. Depending on which app you're using to listen to this right now, you may not be able to share, but you might be able to favorite, or heart, or like, or thumbs up. It doesn't matter, as long as you do something. That kind of helps me understand that I'm actually providing some good content for people. Now, back to our podcast. So, I've been doing this thing lately. I call it my 12 Holy Walks of Christmas. All this really means is that I use something that Michael Myrdad has created, and it's called the 12 Holy Days of Christmas. And these are just lessons for 12 days from December 25th on. And my goal is to apply it to my God walks that I take. Now, before this started, I'd have a God walk maybe once or twice a week. But for this, I chose to start my walks on December 25th, and I have walked each day since then, and today, January 5th, is actually the last day of the celebration for me. So I've walked every day, roughly around 3 to 6 miles each walk, but it's my God walks. And now during these walks, I tend to focus on my intentions deeply and sincerely to the concepts of each of these 12 days. For instance, today being the last day of the 12 holy days, I'm honoring Leo the Lion, the zodiac, and talking to God about concepts like the last shall be first and the first shall be last, wearing the crown of my kingdom being heaven, and to walk with spirit, and to ensure this walk be of faith, not of hope, but of deep faith and belief. That sort of thing. So each of my walks with God have given me divine thoughts and concepts to either write things like these podcasts, or I've written song lyrics which are being given to musicians to write music to, or maybe I've had spiritual insights that I get to share with others, even on my walks, things like that. So yesterday during my God walk on the 11th holy day, I was doing my usual communing with God about my spirit family versus my birth family. That was kind of the topic for the 11th holy day. I was given today's topic to write about. So this podcast actually came to me yesterday during my God walk. Now these two don't really kind of coincide. In other words, this podcast topic isn't really the same content as my God walk for the 11th holy day, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that this all came to me and I'm going to be sharing it with you. So now, the title of this podcast is very intentional, as we're about to dive into an understanding of what choices in life can look like. The Road Not Taken is actually a poem written by Robert Frost, if you weren't aware of it. Robert Frost was a poet from California. He lived somewhere in the late 1800s to the mid 1960s. He chose to reside in New England, which is where I grew up in that area, and the poem has been part of the American school system through the American literature classes commonly taught at high schools for decades. So it has a deeper meaning than what you may recall or what you might have been told. And we're going to really dig into this just to see what exactly this poem was written for and for whom it was written. Now, before we get to the heart of this, I'm going to share this poem with you so you can better recall the words used by Mr. Frost. So again, the road not taken. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So what we're going to do, folks, is you might have kind of caught on to the theme of the poem just in general, but we're going to talk about each paragraph to better understand the initial depth of the poem. After we do that, we're going to dig into a little bit deeper into the real reason why Robert Frost actually wrote the poem and the deeper connection to it. So here's how a majority of the scholars would talk about this poem and tell the readers what exactly Mr. Frost was alluding to. So we're just going to start from paragraph to paragraph, or lines to lines, and so on. So the first paragraph, or the beginning of the poem: 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Now, this first part is basically expressing the finding of 2 separate roads, and one of them appears to be captivating to the person walking, though they appear to be saddened by the fact that they can only take one direction at a time. Okay, going forward. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Now, here it seems like the writer is admiring the option of road number 1, and imagining what lies ahead at the end of the turn. The next paragraph: then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. So it's here that the writer shares the doubts about the walker's impression of the first road, and seeing that the grass might be greener on the other side, so to speak. Now, the phrase, having perhaps the better claim, is telling us of kind of like the expectations of the walker regarding making the choice because of his first impression of the first road. Continuing: though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. Now, more of the walker's recognition comes out here of the equality between the 2 roads, and how it appears to be kind of a choice with little to no obvious consequence, because either one, there's been wear on it. But, he believed that road number 1 seemed to be a little more used. Now on to the next paragraph. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Now this is basically just saying, even though both trails have been walked on and have pretty good amount of wear on them, the morning leaves had fallen and covered both roads equally, and without previous footsteps on either, making it more of maybe a flip of a coin decision as to which road to take. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. This seems to be the walker deciding that taking the road less traveled is where he wants to go, and that he can always come back another time to try the second road, yet he still seems to doubt if he will ever come back to walk the second road, thus creating more kind of indecision for the walker. Next paragraph. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. And this is where the walker is convinced that someday, when they're much older, they might come back to try the second road. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Now, traditionally, folks, this was seen as the walker making the best choice, and that in that choice, the result was far better than walking the other road. In choosing the road less traveled, he doesn't want to follow the regular crowd and desires uniqueness and individuality in his travels. That's a nice understanding of the poem. Yet, here's the truth behind why Robert Frost actually wrote The Road Not Taken. So, during about a 3 to 4 year time span from I think it was 1912 to 1915, Robert Frost spent his time in England with one of his good friends named Edward Thomas, who I think was another poet. They spent a lot of time together and had many walks talking about life and poems and such. And Edward would bring Robert around in the woods and around the trails and so on. During some of those walks, Robert noticed that Edward had some deep struggles with decision making, and that even during their simple walks, when the roads came to a junction, Edward couldn't decide which direction to go because he believed he would be making a wrong decision, regardless of which direction he committed to. So after their time together, after Robert returned to New England, he decided to share this poem with Edward, as Edward was struggling with a decision that would change his life. Robert, being the friend that he was, quickly wrote The Road Not Taken and sent a copy to Edward. Edward, of course, after reading the poem, and quite possibly taking it too personally, he actually enlisted in World War I. And unfortunately, 2 years later, he was killed at the Battle of Arras, which was on the Western Front. I think it was located in France. What a decision to make. You know, Robert trying to get this man to just step up, own your decisions, and be good with them. And don't question, don't second guess yourself. And the guy finally does. And unfortunately, he joins the war and dies 2 years later. Now, with this new knowledge that I just presented to you, let's take another deeper look at how this poem comes together. And this will be more in the lines of how Robert Frost had written the poem, the intentions behind it, versus how people have interpreted it for the last 100 years almost. So, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Now, with Edward's indecisiveness, you can more clearly see that these lines represent the negativity found by Robert of his friend, and how the regret comes out by not being able to travel both on this day. Sorry I could not travel both. I mean, that's almost very apologetic. I know it might be taken as just saying, and what a shame I could not travel both. But because of Robert's connection with Edward, this middle sentence, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler, it's more like, dang, I really wish I could, but I guess I can't. Or it's almost like he's taking fault in this. Continuing, long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. It's almost like you can feel the struggle within this man as he cautiously reviews the road. So Robert's trying to convey, man, it's okay. We get that you're having a struggle. You look down one as far as you can. You're studying it to see exactly what it might provide you. The next paragraph. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Now the phrase, and having perhaps the better claim, it's kind of showing the subtle doubt of Edward's assessments and how Robert may have seen him floundering as they took walks together. Then took the other as just as fair, meaning, yeah, that looks pretty good. And having perhaps the better claim, kind of saying, you know what, I made the right choice because it was grassy and wanted wear. It was like as if it was tantalizing. He said, you know, yeah, I want to go that way. Finally making a decision. The next part, though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same. Again, hindsight being 2020, the walker could see the other trail was about equal in travel, which could very easily be seen as the contradictions that Robert witnessed from Edward's walks and life choices. Check this out, next paragraph. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. Though he made a choice to walk a road, as unused as the other, or as unused as it appeared to be, he initially believes that he'll be back to walk the road again someday. Yet, in the same concept, he also doubts that he would ever travel back that way to accomplish it anyway. He didn't doubt that he should ever come back. He doubted if he would ever come back. So he's second guessing. In this paragraph, Robert is showing Edward that, dude, you are second guessing yourself every step of the way. You start to show promise, yet you'll second guess yourself. So the next paragraph. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Robert is writing this as if Edward is making decisions. He is admitting his sorrow and once again believing that, more than likely, he will be very old by the time he ever comes back to walk that other road, if he ever does at all. Somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Now these last few lines appear to be Robert's attempt at telling Edward that no matter where you go, there you are. It's my belief that this poem is telling all who read The Road Not Taken that it has nothing to do with choosing which road to take. Rather, it is all about allowing yourself to be satisfied and hold tight in the perfection of the journey to where you are. Think of the title, The Road Not Taken. I believe that because Robert experienced his dear friend's struggles while they were together, he knew that the road not taken was to be about letting go of the struggles that Edward had. And to allow things to just flow and be exceptionally happy with the results of the decision made and not regret the choice you decided not to make. And just take a moment and think of the last 7 words of the entire poem, and that has made all the difference. again, folks, in my opinion, Robert was not trying to say, don't be like most of the others and do your own thing. It was more like Robert was trying to say that no matter what you decide, Edward, you will be where you need to be, and to absorb the success along the way to where you are. And that will make all the difference. Not which road you took, but the success and the beauty and the completeness of deciding. But then again, folks, it's just my interpretation of the same poem you may have read and loved. Either way, you listening to this podcast has made all the difference for me. Now, lastly, as in life, guys, when we have moments of decision making in front of us, if we look to see which decision best holds space for the good of all, or the best of everybody around us, or at least our best intentions, then we can't go wrong with it. If the decision only brings a moment of happiness to us individually, then we might want to rethink the options that we see, and maybe check to see if it's best for us or all, or maybe it's just our ego trying to convince us that, oh, no, it's the best decision. You want to do it for yourself. Who cares about anybody else? That's just a thought on my part, folks. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed this neat little walk down poetry lane. I've said many times before, I'm not a poet. I do read poetry, and I'm part of some Facebook poetry pages like Forest of Song, which is, there's hundreds and hundreds of global poets that write poems like constantly, and the amount of intense imagination and love and caring and just sharing emotions in it is just super. So in case you're interested in more poetry and you want to connect with something else, that's a fantastic avenue to take. So thank you very much, folks, for listening into another short podcast. I greatly appreciate your time and effort. If you ever have any questions for me or want to know more about other podcasts that I do, feel free to give me an email at bear, like the animal bear, at Yava-Coco You can just check the podcast out and reply. You can always go to YouTube and listen to the podcast there and drop a comment in that you want to talk to me. It doesn't matter. Either way, I'll be available for you. Thank you very much, people. God bless you all, and I'll talk to you next time.